Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to our live Android 15 Spotlight Week Q&A. I'm your host, Aaron, and here to join me is this lovely panel of people and to help and answer all of your Android 15 questions. So before we kick it off, I'd like to share a little bit about how this is going to work. Obviously, question and answers, but a lot of these questions are sourced from the social channels that we've communicated this event via the hashtag AskAndroid tag. And for those who are tuned in live, we're also taking questions from there. So yeah, let's do a roundtable of introductions. And I want to ask the panel that when you do introduce yourselves, I'd like to let the audience get an insight of like something you're excited about or you feel compelled to share about Android 15 or Spotlight Week. I'll start with myself. So I already introduced myself. I'm Aaron, and I want to say that I am most excited about the visual assets. I know it's not really relevant to the features themselves, but I think it's really cool seeing all the visuals, not just graphics, but the videos that have been launched. It points to something that I'm not very good at producing myself, so it's always nice to see. I'm not sure if the group here has seen the new statue or the graphic of the red stripes, 15 stripes representing the version itself. But yeah, I think it's really cool. So yeah, I'm gonna hand it off to Alice.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, super excited about the new assets as well. Hi, everyone. I'm Alice. I'm representing foreground service and background work. You might have seen me in a few videos in the past. And the thing that I'm really excited about in terms of Spotlight Week is that we recently launched a new blog post showcasing Google Maps and their offline download feature. So they integrated a new platform API. This was actually introduced in Android 14 called User-Initiated Data Transfer. And this API has been being adopted by a growing number of apps. We're actually seeing hundreds of millions of user devices using this new API. And we've also seen some really great wins, including with Google Maps. They've improved their download reliability by 10% and significantly reduced the amount of download failures. This is also like a really great alternative option if you are impacted by some of the Android 15 changes, which includes data sync foreground service timing out after 6 hours. I will hand it off to Dan.
Thanks, Alice. So for me, this is kind of strange, but what I'm most excited about is that we finally have an application start info API. So now, even when your application is running in the application class, you can find out why your app started, and you can instrument the whole thing. So you can actually look at your performance in the same way that we look at it in Android Vitals. So I'm excited about that coming to me and to developers. And off to Min.
Hi, I'm Min. I'm a product manager. I think, Aaron, you stole my answer, so we'll have to give a pretty biased answer here. But I think I'm really excited to see more modern and immersive apps with edge-to-edge starting Android 15. Yeah, I will hand it off to Nilansh.
Hey, thanks, Min. Hey, everyone. This is Nilansh Sahai. I primarily work on picture-in-picture and passkeys. In passkeys, also, I work on restore credentials. And to answer the question of my favorite thing about Android 15, I would specifically say that it is definitely the all-new camera and media features. I was going through the list of all the new features that we are introducing in camera and media, and I was very excited about that.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for the introductions. And I guess we'll kick it off with the first question. All right. So any storage and permission changes on Android 15? And Alice, this is off to you.
Cool. Thank you for the question. So in terms of storage and permissions, I think I'm just going to interpret this in two parts. Are there any storage specific changes, and are there any permission specific changes? So part one is storage changes in Android 15. The answer is no. Since we introduced this selected photos access in Android 14, we haven't actually changed any storage related features. And just a reminder of what selected photos access is in Android 14, it allows users to be able to grant specific limited sets of images and videos into the library rather than granting access to all media. So in terms of permission changes, there are a few, one of which is around system alert window. So there is a change with system alert window where if you are using this permission and you're using it to run a foreground service as an exemption when starting a foreground service from the background, there will be an additional enforcement where you have to have the system alert window, the overlay window, visible before you start the foreground service. This should probably make sense to a lot of users as to why we want to do that, just to make sure that you're not taking advantage of this exemption. But if you don't start, or if the visible window is not visible, it will throw a foreground service not allowed exception. And then the other change that might be related to permissions is on how it impacts Do Not Disturb. So when apps target Android 15, they're no longer able to modify the global Do Not Disturb policy. And that also requires you to have certain access to permissions granted to the user to be able to do this as well. So for all other changes, we recommend you check out the Android 15 behavior change. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, and in terms of storage, definitely look at the Google Play policies too, because there are also specific policies around those permissions.
Cool. Great. Well, thank you both. And let's move on to the next question. The next question is, why has Android decided to enforce edge-to-edge? And what are the benefits of this change? That's a good one. Off to you, Min.
That's a great question. So we ran an internal study and which showed that the users strongly prefer edge-to-edge experience over non-edge-to-edge experience. And they also associated premiumness with edge-to-edge. So I see that the hardware devices invest heavily every year to make the device bezels smaller. And in a sense, we saw the non-edge-to-edge app experience as having an on-screen bezels. So with edge-to-edge, apps can take advantage of more screen real estate, which provides more modern, immersive, and visually appealing user experience across the Android apps. And we look forward to seeing more Android apps adopting edge-to-edge and providing a more modern experience.
Great. Awesome. Yeah, I personally too prefer the edge-to-edge experience and have seen it in some apps. And although very subtle, it does provide a more polished experience. So yeah, these are good changes. And let's move on to the next question. Next question is private space. Private space is here, and how does it affect my app? And Dan, you can answer this.
Sure. So running in a private space is actually really similar to running in a work profile. If your app can already run in a work profile, for the most part, it's going to be able to run inside of a private space. There is one interesting caveat because of the design of private space. When the user locks their private space, your app stops running. And it also means that your app isn't going to be able to post notifications. So if your app is one of those that actually for whom that is really, really important, it is a good thing to note that running in private space will not give you some capabilities that your app might normally be able to have. But for the most part, again, if you can run inside of a work profile, you'll be able to run inside of a private space.
Great. Yeah, private space is definitely one of my favorite features as well. I use it personally for the SCAR app where you can lock and unlock your car. So being in that partitioned space with that extra level of authentication is definitely a good thing. Awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. You can actually run a completely separate account and stuff like that inside of it too. If you haven't used it, it's pretty cool.
Nice. Good to hear. Great. And the next question we have is picture-in-picture related. Okay. there is a new picture-in-picture callback introduced in Android 15. We've thought about implementing pip, shorthand for picture-in-picture, but how do I know if picture-in-picture is worth investing in? The launch, you can answer for this.
So my take on this is, first of all, definitely we should be implementing pip, because what we have seen is that there is a huge number of pip invocations across different devices, across different apps, and not only just invocations. Users also like to stay in pip. They like to do a lot of multitasking with the pip feature. Also one more thing that I wanted to highlight was that with large screens and foldables becoming more and more prominent, the value of multitasking and all the features related to multitasking is actually gaining a lot of traction. So I would personally definitely encourage to implement pip. And yes, we have implemented a few new callbacks in Android 15. All this to ensure that the entire enter and exit transition is as smooth as possible. It is as seamless as possible.
So out of curious, polling this panel, who here wants to see more apps have picture-in-picture? Yeah, I mean, it's just awesome.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great feature.
Yeah, especially for. Go ahead, Amit.
Yeah, +1 to everything Nilansh said. I think one thing to also note is picture-in-picture, while it's primarily used by the video apps, it's also used by Google Maps and also like video call apps like Google Meet, WhatsApp, Messenger. So its use cases go beyond just videos too.
Yeah, another thing I want to call out is, as you've noticed, there are more restrictions with foreground service. And if you are taking advantage of system alert window or foreground service to showcase certain information to the user, and you could use picture-in-picture instead, that's a way better experience for users and doesn't require you to use these more complex APIs.
Picture-in-picture also is a guaranteed way to make sure your app keeps running, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for your input there. And we'll move on to the next question. Next question is somewhat related. The system alert window permission is being restricted in Android 15 around foreground services launches. Based on the state of an overlay being present before launching FGS. Yeah, what is the future of this permission? Alice?
Thanks. Yeah, that's a great question. I know that, seeing permission changes can feel kind of worrisome, and you're worried about whether or not it might impact you in the future. What I can say is that the permission around restricting foreground services launch is specifically to mitigate some misuse of foreground service. And we don't currently have any immediate plans to deprecate this permission. With that said, as we've already mentioned, there are some great alternative APIs that, in scenarios where it would make sense to use those alternative APIs, including picture-in-picture and also the Bubbles API, we would really encourage you to do that instead.
Right. Awesome. Thank you, Alice. All right. Now let's go on to the next question. Is this autofill support through Credman API there on Compose? Nilansh?
Yeah, so the autofill support as of now is only on views. We don't have the Compose support right now, but we are very actively working on that, and we will be providing the Compose support soon.
Great. Thanks, Nilansh. Okay. Next question. How can I improve my widget previews in Android 15? Okay, so I can answer this actually. So yeah, there's actually a new push API in Android 15 for generator previews, which basically allows you to use a non-static image So yeah, basically up to your cadence of like providing more up-to-date images using remote views. You provide this to the provider, and it'll pull in that image when they set that preview on the screen. So it could be reflective of something that's more up to date versus something that's very static. Great, I got to answer a question. All right. And the next question would be from a Ronnie Thomas from the live chat. Awesome. Could you talk more about PDF improvements in Android 15? Also curious about why PDF Viewer is implemented as fragment rather than a compose component. I'll have to defer
talk
to
a little bit to this one.
Sure. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, so I think the PDF improvements are first of all really cool. Like we've had the PDF class for a long time, and you've been able to do basic PDF viewing, but now we've added the ability to search PDFs. We've also added the ability to actually fill out forms within PDFs. So it really allows you to have almost an entire set of PDF functionality within your app. And to do this, we've made a kind of unusual thing in the SDK that actually brings it back to kind of some older devices through the use of Google Play system updates too. So that's the good news. Initially, we brought out the PDF viewer as a fragment rather than as a compose component, actually because we had some code lying around that implemented it as a fragment, which we base this off of. But we are working on getting a compose solution out. We just wanted to make sure that people could look at it as quickly as possible, give us feedback, but wait, because there is a plan to make it more compose friendly.
Great, thank you, Dan. And the next question is, Android is now supporting 16 KB page sizes. How will this impact my app? Dan, I think this is you as well.
So, so if your app is using a library that is built using the NDK, and it isn't already built with the correct offsets required for 16 KB pages, then it will not work on devices that are 16 KB that are set for 16 KB pages. It will crash and it will not be a good experience. So what you need to do is try out your app on the emulator, which we currently have that uses 16 KB page sizes, or on the device. I think in the QPR release of Android, we actually allow you to enable it on, I think, Pixel 8 devices using a setting, and it'll reboot the device, and then you can actually try the whole device running with 16 KB page sizes, and it makes everything a little bit faster because it doesn't have to manage so many pages, and that's really great, especially for devices that have lots and lots of RAM, as we're seeing. So that's the positive thing, but you do need to make sure to actually test this, and when it goes live, there's going to be some more things in play to help you out as well. But for right now, the best thing you can do is just test to see what happens.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Let's go to live chat. And the next question is, will Android 15 continue the trend that Android 14 has of requiring foreground microphone permissions for voice over IP calling app that is using connection servers?
I can take that.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Alice.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to mention that there are certain permissions that are while in use where they're a little bit more sensitive to users. So for example, using the microphone, using camera, these are things that we really want to make sure that users are offering explicit intent in order to offer access to use these kind of more privacy sensitive use cases. And that's why in certain scenarios where I think in Android 14, we made it so that foreground services require while in use permissions to be granted in order to actually launch foreground services associated with that type. So yes, we are continuing this trend, and you will continue to see us enforcing and ensuring privacy for users so that they are accessing these more sensitive permissions and being more thoughtful around it. And one of the changes called out in Android 15 is that we're adding some restrictions around audio focus. So if you want to gain access to audio focus, you will need to be either a foreground app or have a foreground service running in order to be able to request audio focus. But yeah, it was a good question. Thank you.
I would say the only thing I'd want to add to that is that we do have two APIs that help make this a little bit more straightforward rather than using a foreground service by yourself. Can definitely consider looking at the Telecom Jetpack library, which I know is still in alpha, but we're working hard on that to try to make this a lot easier, as well as the Connection Manager API that's built into the platform.
Yeah, great call out. I forgot to mention that. Thanks, Dan.
Awesome. Thank you both. And the next question is for Dan as well. Is making our app 16 KB page compatible hard, and what improvements we can expect from this change?
So for the most part, for most apps, it's going to involve recompiling them. However, if your app is using memmap in order to map memory, as an example, you'll need to map memory chunks aligned to those 16 KB pages. The way you would normally do this is look at if there's a page size constant. That no longer works because the page size is no longer a constant. So we've added a new API to allow you to dynamically fetch the page size. That, again, any calculations you're doing that are depending on the page size would have to change. Again, most apps, this isn't going to impact, but if you are doing your own memory management or you're relying on a memory management solution, there is a possibility that will also need to be addressed with usually it's just a very few minor changes, particularly since some other platforms already have implemented 16 KB pages. So if you have a library that runs across platform, you probably have already done this. So it's not, but yes. And in terms of improvements, again, on devices that have lots of RAM, or if your app is managing lots of memory, you will see a performance improvement. And again, about 10% is what we've put out there, and that's the reason why we're so excited to bring this to the platform. But it is going to take some time, and what's really important is all of you testing your apps so that we actually so an OEM can feel confident to launch a device that actually uses 16 KB pages.
Cool. Thank you, Dan. The next question is from the live chat from David. Can you explain some of the new use cases you see possible with Android 15 DND APIs? It's a bit abstract without concrete examples. I don't know, Dan, if you want to take this, but I do want to make mention that I have some familiarity with the APIs and the changes. I don't know about the new DND APIs, but I know about the changes in regards to the restrictions around set interrupt filter and the set the Zen policy, and basically which allows the app to modify the global state of the do not disturb policy, which you can no longer do because it overrides the user's state that they set. So I know of that change, but I'm not familiar with the new and any new DND APIs. Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty cool. We've added this concept of Zen device effects, which allow rules to trigger things like having night mode or dimming the wallpaper. Again, these are all things just to make the do not disturb experience a little bit more, I guess, holistic, I would describe it. So that's the kind of thing you can imagine. You can also add an icon to rules to make them more visible. But I agree. We could use some more concrete examples there. It's a good call out.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. And the next question is edge to edge. Does edge to edge support SDK 21? Min?
I believe the answer is no. You need to be targeting the latest SDK to get the edge-to-edge enforcement.
I think the key thing, though, is you should probably set enable edge-to-edge in your app anyways, like regardless of what platform you're targeting, and you'll get most of the edge-to-edge changes, not all of them, but you'll at least draw edge-to-edge everywhere. There's a few minor changes that are only going to happen under Android 15, like the way it draws underneath the area that's used for navigation and stuff like that. But in general, just enable draw edge-to-edge everywhere, because that just makes it better for everyone.
+1 to that.
Awesome. Great. And let's move on to the next live question by Leo. Can you provide insights into the new power management techniques in Android 15 and their implications for app battery usage? I don't know who can take this. Dan, would you be familiar with this?
That is a really good question, and I do not have a good answer for that. I think part of what I think the partial answer is some of the background restrictions that we've done are tied to that a little bit. So I think that probably there is one change, now that I think about it, that we made in Android 15 around this, and it had to do with probably it's a pretty minor one, but once your app is stopped forcibly by the user with the force stop, which means they literally went into app info and stopped your app will no longer get started until the user actually starts it. And there's a couple of changes around that that happen, so that that means that when your app gets started by the user, it'll look like the system just started up. You'll get the startup broadcast and stuff like that. So there's a few changes there for apps too. If they're force stopped, that's pretty rare. For an app to be force stopped that way. And so that's part of the reason why that's there, is that if a user has taken that, like, we really don't want your app to be running, the user just have to walk through a little bit more. But that's the thing that I think of mostly. Android 14 had larger changes involving cached apps that you should definitely take a look at.
Yeah, just to add to that, some of the changes that are around foreground service are also intended to improve battery drain, which includes adding a timeout to data sync foreground service, where you can't run foreground service for a longer duration than 6 hours as long as it's in the background. There's also restrictions around, I've already mentioned this, system alert window, and also around boot complete. So if you are taking advantage of the broadcast boot complete, there will be certain foreground services, certain types that are not allowed to start from this boot complete broadcast. But with that said, there are a limited set compared to Android 14, but we're continuing to learn more about various techniques to improve battery. And actually, also as a plug, I recently produced a video as part of Google I/O that is around how to improve battery. So you can check it out. It is called How to Improve Battery Efficiency in Background Work. And you can search that up on Google or YouTube.
Awesome. You get to see a lot more of Alice. It's great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And next question we received from X. Any changes for Jetpack Compose on Android 15? I can answer for this, actually. Jetpack Compose is an unbundled toolkit, and it's not tied to release. So when you see releases there, it coincidentally probably is just aligning with the release of the latest Dessert release. But funnily enough, there has been some changes in the Jetpack Compose BOM that was just released yesterday. So this brings in new features and performance enhancements and improvements. So any developer using this should upgrade to it. So that's my answer there. Great.
I think in general, keep up with the latest version of Jetpack Compose, and you'll be happier with the way things run on the latest versions of Android. They're not tied together closely, but if something is needed, we'll add it there.
Right, that makes sense. Thanks, Dan. Next question. Does autofill suggestion through Credential Manager is it backward compatible, and how's it different from the autofill APIs the developers are already using. Nilansh, this is for you.
Okay, so no, first it is only supported on Android 15 beta, and the second part of the answer is Autofill through Credential Manager actually eases the developer efforts to like by user developers can just use one single API for all the authentication and autofill suggestions. So it eases the developer efforts a lot.
Great, thanks to launch. And the next question is from the live chat from Adrian. What performance improvements can we expect just from updating to Android 15? What under the hood improvements did you make? I don't know who wants to take this. Dan?
I mean, there's always performance improvements that are being made. I don't have like a list of the things that we did just offhand. So yeah, I wish I could say more about that. I know there's been a whole bunch of work that's been done in general in graphics, but and a lot of this kinds of work that's been done is to make things work better with the variable refresh rate that's going on in our latest devices. You have new devices. There's a whole bunch of work to make that smoother. And as an example of the kind of things that are being done. And also, again, there's always work that's going on in art as well. But the cool thing about the artwork is that art is actually updated through Google Play system updates. So any work we do to improve things in art, and I think we may have had even a blog post on a little bit of the work we're doing in art. So that I would definitely look for that in terms of performance.
Just to add to that, I know that this isn't just from updating Android 15, but the 16 KB change is actually a pretty significant improvement to performance as well.
Yeah, that will when we have devices that ship with that, that'll be really nice.
Cool, great, thank you both. And another one for the live chat. Is there anything done to improve the stability and predictability of the TEE/Android key store in Android 15? Generating keys on different manufacturer devices give wildly different behaviors. Yeah, I don't know. I think Dan. Sorry, Dan. I think a lot of these are going to be handed off to you.
That is a good question, and I don't know the answer to that one. I'm sorry. I wish I don't want to give you any false hope on this one. So I will. We'll have to defer that to being offline, but I'll try to get an answer for you on that one.
Sounds good. Yeah, we are monitoring the YouTube chat, so we'll stay around and we'll definitely answer answer questions there. And anything that we don't get to answer, we have a collection of the answers of the questions here, so we'll figure out a way to communicate that to the community. Awesome. And let's ask the next question. The glance widget stuff, does it only work on Android 15, or is that the way widgets on Android have been created?
So, I mean, Glance is pretty cool. Glance basically takes the existing APIs that we use for widgets. So, remote view, list view, and a few other things. And when you create the alternate component inside of Jetpack Compose, it actually creates that widget on your behalf. When you have a button, it actually creates a broadcast receiver that listens to that. It can actually launch jobs on your behalf. It's really pretty amazing, like all the stuff that it does to make it work so that you can use Compose APIs or Compose-like APIs in the widgets. But it doesn't actually leverage any new widget features. The only really big thing that we've done in Android 15 is the preview that we talked about, the ability to have custom previews. The rest of it all works, and you can use Glance to generate those.
Cool. Thanks, Dan. Next, from live chat, is there any large form factor specified updates coming in Android 15? So I know Min didn't highlight this in his snippet about what he's working on, but he actually works on large screens as well. Min, can you chime in on this?
Yeah, we've made polishes and improvements for large tablets and foldables this past year, throughout the year. But a few things that come to mind are around the multitasking area. One is we added split screen app pairs. So you're now able to save your favorite split screen pairs to your home screen or to your taskbar. Second thing is now you're able, so on Android 14, your taskbar was a transient taskbar and that you have to swipe up. And once you're not interacting with it, then the taskbar hides. But now you have this pinnable taskbar that you're able to pin the taskbar on your screen for easier access to apps. So those two updates are what comes to mind. But if anyone else have other things to highlight, that'd be great.
Cool. Thanks, Min. And the next question is from X. Why does Android have a terminal and task manager, which are crucial for IT professionals and developers? I can answer this. Not quite Android 15 related, but good to know. So Android 15, as many know, has a ADB terminal command line support. So this is a client-server solution that allows you to debug your app and understand the processes that are going on, and allows you to do a dump of the logs of what's happened. So that is supported on device command line. I don't know. I don't think there's such a thing, but through the developer options as well, there's a way to view a list of the running services, or the running task and the services associated with those apps, and you can stop those apps from running from that view as well. Anybody want to chime in on this? But that's my answer there. Next question: What improvements can we see in Android 15 Automotive? I don't know if we have the panel here is a good representation of, or someone who can answer for this, but maybe I don't know if anyone can ask.
Yeah, I don't actually know if Android 15 is in Automotive yet, even so. But yeah, I don't think anyone on the panel is an automotive expert. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's definitely Automotive doesn't have Android 15 yet, and unclear on when it will be released. But we can follow up.
Sounds good. Awesome. Next question. Can each presenter mention the one big thing they like the most about Android 15 that we should be using in our app that's not directly related to the area of expertise?
Well, that's a tough question. Wow.
The bias was
things we don't know.
I mean, I'll start. I work on SysUI related things, and I love the privacy stuff. So the one thing that comes to mind, obviously the private space, though that is, there's no developer action there other than to check, to see how your app behaves within that space, because obviously you wouldn't have access to the processes of the other apps, and like as mentioned earlier, when it's locked, the services and the notifications associated with that app stops working, but that's being worked on, right, as I understand. But there's also other security related things that I'm excited about, like the secure recording, which is this callback that allows you to see whether, whether while your app's in view, that the screen is being recorded. So an app has an idea that, if the user is viewing something sensitive, to highlight that to the user. So I think that's cool. I'm gonna pass it on to Alice to see what her thoughts are on it's.
Yeah. So one thing that we didn't mention around things that we're excited about is this new API called Profiling Manager. And what it essentially allows you to do is be able to record system traces so that you're able to better understand what your application is doing, and also be able to inspect that trace using Perfetto. And it gives you so much more insight. It's been super helpful internally for us to debug certain situations that are hard to catch. And we're just really excited to see what developers do with this new API. It's called Profiling Manager, so search it up.
All right, so I guess I would be next. We're going in the same order we went through before, and it's something that is not necessarily my areas of expertise, but I'm really excited about is that Android 15 enables predictive back for all applications, which is super cool. And so everyone who has not already implemented predictive back in your app, this is a really great time to do it. It's such a cool feature for all the devices that are using gesture navigation. Basically, it gives you a little preview of where you're going to go, so users know that they're going to go back and maybe not exit out of your app, and it's just really cool looking. So and we have a whole bunch of stuff we've done in Material to add some cool custom animations to it. So to me, that's something I think every app should be doing.
So I can go next, but it seems like I keep getting my answer stolen because that was also my answer, Dan.
Oh,
but
no, I'm sorry.
But I think if I were to pick another thing, I really like the new widget view. So you're able to view how your widget would look before you create the widget. Previously, I was always curious how my widget would look before I put it on my home screen. But now that I'm able to see how it will look, it allows me to plan out my home screen better and really minimize surprises there. I'll hand it off to Nilanj.
Yeah, so it looks like predictive back is everyone's favorite. It's something that I also wanted to talk about. But yeah, speaking about something other than predictive back, I really like all the SysUI changes a lot. Specifically, as Min mentioned about the app pairs thing for multitasking. Multitasking is it's something which is like very productive. For me personally, it's very productive. So that is definitely something that I would vote for. Saving app pairs and multitasking on large screens.
Yeah, making your app adaptive is huge. All right, since
Exactly.
everyone wanted predictive back, I'll mention one other thing then. So as I mentioned before, I was really excited about application start info. And the really cool thing about it is that your app often gets started for kind of reasons, because like a broadcast might be happening, and you might have a whole bunch of things that you're using with dependency injection, and you might not realize all the stuff that's happening when your app gets launched in all these different phases. And so this makes it much easier. You can put stuff in your application class to track like what's going on during all the different ways your app can be launched. You can say, oh, I'm loading all of those classes unnecessarily for this one broadcast, for example, which is just, and so that to me is really exciting. Like you can really tune and make sure your app is really, a good citizen, of the operating system, and make the experience better for everyone. So definitely take a look at application start info. And the best part is you use it there, and then all the changes you make to make your app better work everywhere. So it's just super very similar to the profiling stuff. Like, the profiling stuff allows you to profile things in the field, and application start info allows you to see in the field kind of what's going on real devices in terms of how your app starts.
Yeah, and it can help you improve your code start, which we know improves user engagement as well.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for your answer. And I want to say that, looking through the spreadsheet, there's a lot more questions, but we have to wrap it up. So, we'll find some means to answer those questions. I see a lot of good ones there. But first off, I'd like to thank the panel, for being here, for answering questions, and more importantly, the audience for participating and posting their questions. So, we'll say goodbye here, and stay tuned for future Spotlight Weeks and question and answers as well. Thanks, everyone.